I got ran over by a car, but the driver didn't see me. What is something about yourself that sounds totally made up but is 100% real? I was the best man on both sides of a lesbian wedding because I had dated both the bride and the bride, stayed close friends and introduced them to each other after our breakups. I was at a store when Tony Hawk was signing autographs. I was only 10 at the time and was a huge fan. One of his early video games had just come out. The store had a couple of TVs on the wall and some video games to play. Being a kid, I waited for one controller to open up and someone leaves. A kid ended up leaving and I grabbed the controller and started playing and minding my own business. A couple of minutes later the store wanted to grab photos of Tony playing his own video game. He came over and grabbed the second controller and began to play multiplayer with me. It probably played for 10 minutes. The bonus was it was also my 10th birthday. So I played Tony Hawk Pro Skater with Tony Hawk. I've published 4 peer-reviewed scientific papers on hamster testicles. I'm currently working on a critical COVID-related project which doesn't involve testicles and thus would be much less exciting for reading purposes. A pelican engulfed my head with its massive fucking beak when I was a small child. Pelicans are cunts. I won 2 TV game shows. The $10,000 Pyramid, won $10,300, in 1975, and Sale of the Century, was on the show for 9 days, won $34,000 in cash and prizes, in '85. I got ran over by a car, but the driver didn't see me and proceeded to back over me. Thanks for all the kind words. I'm shocked at the amount of people who said that this happened to them or someone they know/knew as well. The world really is a weird place. And for all who are asking, my legs are perfectly fine now. On a side note, I actually really enjoy running. It's one of my favorite things to do. No, I'm not from China nor have I ever lived there. I'm American. I don't quite understand why people are asking this. I ran out of gas outside of La Paz, Bolivia. Luckily it was downhill for about 6 kilometers into the city. I coasted the whole way on my motorbike, past buses and drifted into a gas station. Never missed a beat. At age 50-odd and with limited to no video game experience, my mother completed Mario 64 before I did, in about half the time it finally took me to do it. My brother is 31, I'm 19, and when he was born his grandmother, we don't share the same father, bought him a NES. My mother, not knowing what to do with it, turned it on and played Super Mario Bros. She spent 2 months every day trying to beat the game, even buying a strategy guide to go through it. She beat the game and never touched a video game again. I've had a headache since August 2015 and I will probably have it for the rest of my life. It's only on half my head, so I got that going for me, which is nice. Since August of 2015. That's when I had a craniotomy to remove half a brain tumor. I've had a constant headache, right eye blindness, no feeling, and minor paralysis on the right side of my head. But, if you touch the right side of my head just the right way, even though there is no feeling to the head, it tickles my butt. I don't know how it works. When I was a kid, I woke up to find my cat giving birth to her kittens on my pillow, 1 inch from my face. I took it as a compliment. I am related to William Henry Harrison, the president who died from hypothermia because he wouldn't wear a jacket. My great-grandfather and his son both died from hypothermia as well, but under slightly different experiences. I have almost died from eating way too many vitamins, jumping into a ceiling fan, and jumping from a cliff. My dad almost lit a gas station on fire. Basically, we are a very dumb bloodline starting from William Henry Harrison. When my mom was in grad school she took several labs where she worked with cadavers. Because my dad worked nights she often had to take me to class with her, and she'd usually just plonk me down on the table with the cadaver while she worked on it. I bought a guitar amp from Brad Whitford, of Aerosmith when I was 17. He and Steven Tyler served up cheeseburgers for me and my friends. So, Brad's son was a punk and I knew him from the scene. I was in a band that had some small local marginal success. This is 97-98 in Boston. I needed a new amp for our first US tour but had very little money. I was getting drunk with his son and, on a whim, I asked him if his dad had any amps laying around that he didn't need. We laughed and carried on partying. The next day, I get a call at my home. It was Mr. Whitford himself. He was super nice but to the point. My son says you got a band and need a good rig for your Les Paul. I have something in mind for you. Just gotta have my guy get it from the warehouse. Come by my house in Norwell this weekend and check it out. That was the gist of the call. Obviously, the whole band came with me. And our roadie. We get to his house and it's totally him. So weird. These guys were like gods in Boston. I wasn't the hugest fan but knew him from his work with Wayne's World. He takes me to one of his garages where there is this cool full stack. The brand is Bedrock. An old company from New Hampshire that made good quality amps in the 80s. This one was custom made for Brad. Basically Marshall components. 4 tubes. All the knobs go to 11. Not kidding. Still has the property of Aerosmith stickers on it. He plugs it in and rips a crazy solo on his Les Paul and then hands it to me and I play a couple power chords. He asks for $300 for the whole thing. I pay him and he tells his son to give us a tour of the house. This is where shit gets nuts. It's just like you expect. Tons of gold records, platinum records, pictures of him with people like John Lennon, Robert De Niro, and Joey Ramone. Then we get to see his studio and the largest collection of Marshall amps in the world. Seriously, like 200 cabs. A wall of guitars. Guitars so pretty and amps so cool, it made sense for him to find the one he sold me dispensable. After the house tour, he told us to meet him at the little bar and grill they own in town. When we get there early and he arrives 30 minutes later with motherfucking Steven Tyler in tow. You guys the punk group? He was so nice. They went in the back and came out with burgers for us all on the house. Then they straight up left. Irish goodbye, even. I still have the amp. I used it on the road for almost 10 years in 5 bands. Now, it's just a conversation piece. But it still works. I'll crank her up every now and then. I was once sponsored by the Crunk Energy Drink Company for sailing. I imagine I was the only sailor on their list. I literally just emailed them saying that I sailed and asked if they wanted me to put stickers on my boat. They sent me a few cases of the drink, t-shirts, hats, the works. My car was known as the Crunk Mobile. I can't look left. Seriously. I'm not an ambi looker, it's like the Zoolander of birth defects. It's called Duane syndrome and my left eye can't turn left, so if I try to look to my left I see double. Growing up my parents raised me to believe it was a party trick and not a disability, so I would always show it off to friends, which in retrospect I think was pretty sweet. My mom discovered that something was off when I was a baby and she was doing the airplane motion with the spoon of baby food to the left. My left eye was not cooperating lol. Husband and I fell in love at first sight. I moved in together after 2 days. Married 5 months later. Still married. It will be 40 years in May. I am one of the very few people outside World War I to live through mustard gas. So rare the doctors, 1995 no internet, had no idea how to treat me. Pure.child.stupidity. I grew up in a sparsely populated High Sierra community with lots of empty vacation homes. One of these homes was under construction about a block. There were no blocks in reality, just long windy roads cutting through the forest, and the construction crew would just leave the half-finished house open between shifts because no one lives here anyway. Me, a retard. I and a friend decided to stumble into the home and fuck around with random stuff. I saw a large vat used for mixing liquids and poured an entire bucket of industrial cleaning liquid into it. I went and got another large bucket full of them, don't mix rando industrial shums children, and dumped that in there too. Huge yellow gas explosion in my face. I got about 15 feet away before collapsing and beginning to retch yellow goo and vomit everywhere. No breathing now, just gasping and vomiting goop. My friend ran to get my mom. She called an ambulance. They put me in a helicopter and sent me to UC Davis Medical Center. My doctor eventually made contact with someone who knew how to treat my case through the internet. I had never heard of it. 2 weeks in the ICU, almost died, and my lungs are still fucking trash. I'm 34 now. I cannot see 3D effects in movies or games. I didn't know that until a friend showed me his new Nintendo 3DS and I asked him whether this thing was a scam because it didn't look any different to me than a normal DS. We had a fight over this because we both thought the other one was bullshitting him. You're holding it wrong. How the fuck do you not see this? Are you fucking kidding me right now? There's nothing 3D about this thing. Me too. I had eye operations as a child, and as such, my eyes aren't properly in line with each other. Doctors tell me my brain has adjusted, So I don't see double or anything, and my vision is excellent, but I also don't see 3 dimensions. Everything looks flat to me. The only way I know an item is closer than another is because it appears larger. I have no depth perception whatsoever. One of my ancestors was dumb and bought one of Napoleon's doorknobs. It turns out it's fake. Doorknobs were invented after Napoleon died. My great-great-grandfather was a Pinkerton detective, acted on vaudeville, and had 5 wives in 2 different states that knew nothing of each other. He also slightly changed his last name each time and never got caught until the Ancestry website happened. Lol. Sounds a bit like my great-grandfather. He had a wife in France, and then 2 in the US in neighboring counties. He was caught though. My great-grandmother was wife 2, she found out about wife 3 and divorced him. No one knew about the first wife in France until I pulled his service records from World War I. Once in college I applied for a job at the library help desk. I figured I would help people find books. Didn't give it much more thought than that. During the interview, I aced all of the customer service questions. Then they asked me whether I knew how to defrag a hard drive. Cue alarm bells in my head, but I kept calm outwardly and said no, but you can teach me. I worked in IT for 3 years by accident. They were too nice to fire me. I made my last boss swear on her life she wouldn't call me for tech support. They call my cell when I'm sick in bed and ask how to reinstall the printer not a dang week later. I've been stabbed 8 times. I didn't get the chance to tell my story in court as they pled guilty before I was called. I was drunk and I came out of the pub I was in to get some fresh air. I walked past 3 guys and one of them asked me for a cigarette. I told him I don't smoke and he became immediately aggressive. I argued with him for a while and his friends started shouting at me and threatening me. At this point, he kind of disappeared behind me. One of the others showed me a knife so I turned and walked away. I knew they were following me as I was walking back to the pub. I had a bus stop on my left-hand side and a building on my right. I looked up and saw the first guy walking towards me. It was fight or flight and I had nowhere to fly to, so I decided that attack was the best form of defense. I think I managed 1 punch before the 3 of them jumped me. They had been robbing and beating up people all over town for about 2 weeks beforehand. I once successfully ran an unfunded shelter for 100 homeless veterans, as a homeless civilian. I lost my job and housing in early 2017. I'd been homeless before and slept rough on the streets, although that was in California where the weather was at least bearable. This time I was living in North Dakota, and I'd seen what the winters were like. I figured if I was going to have to sleep on the streets again, I'd better move somewhere where I didn't have to contend with hypothermia for a good part of the year, so I used the last of my money to relocate to Arizona. I had a totally impractical plan of finding work, and then housing, within a few weeks before my remaining funds ran out, but the deadline came and went and I found myself on the streets again. A homeless advocate I'd reached out to tried to get me sheltered at a place for homeless veterans, but being a civilian, they turned me away. The aforementioned advocate reached an accommodation with the veterans by setting up an overnight shelter for homeless civilians next door that I would run for him. In exchange, I would be allowed to sleep on their property, outside the walls, use their facilities like showers and bathrooms, and join in their communal meals if they had enough food. I've been in 3 fatal train accidents. Never had a scratch. I had my tongue surgically enhanced for more reach and flexibility when I was 8 years old. I'm super jazzed by how many of us are out there. I cannot taste any salt whatsoever. For people asking, it's a brain thing. Food tastes bland, salted chips taste plain, and I've not had any British food. I can still taste other spices and herbs. No, I don't know what cum tastes like, sorry to put you on blast dude, but that's weird. Salt water just tastes bad. MSG and other sodium-based things just make me gag. Getting on Xbox, Overwatch, etc. doesn't help, but I can smell the salt. I took my mother for a surprise trip to NYC. She got married to my father there in '68. The surprise was manufactured by way of telling her we were going to Australia. We live in New Zealand, so a trip to Australia is not a huge deal. It's the type of thing you could do for the weekend, and therefore she packed a bag and brought her passport. We got to the airport and said, surprise! We're going to New York. And she cried her eyes out with delight. When we arrived, on our first morning, I said, okay, what do you want to do? She said, when I was last here, in 1968, the Twin Towers weren't complete, so, I'd like to go to the top of them. Your wish is my command. I said, and off we went to the WTC. That was the afternoon of September 10, 2001. Suffice it to say, there was a particular poignancy when we looked out the window at around 8 a.m. the next morning. I was baptized by a serial killer. My dad sold his motorcycle to a lady who used it to drive to a city a couple of hours away the next day so she could axe murder her ex-husband, his new wife, and their kids. She was apparently fascinated with me and told my parents to never let me get married. My grandpa left his royal status to marry my grandma. I'm not gonna tell my ethnicity because it brings up stigma. My grandpa wasn't anyone relevant as he wasn't high online for the crown. Back in the days, it was kind of a huge deal for elites to marry elites. My grandpa didn't give two shits and left his family to marry my grandma. They lived on a farm where no one knows who he was. My grandfather went AWOL on the French Foreign Legion and was banned from ever going back to France. All because he left to marry my grandmother. One of my dad's friends was in the RAF, but he got bored of it and went AWOL and joined the French Foreign Legion. However, he got bored of that too, so he went AWOL and went back to the RAF and took his punishment. However, this is not where the story ends. Later he and his platoon, including my dad, were going on a skiing training camp in Italy. However, the route took them through France. This is the bit where he informs his platoon leader that they need to do a detour around France because he would be arrested upon entering France. Safe to say his friends were not impressed. My grandfather got an award from Mussolini in 1935. He was just born with 6.3 kilograms, 13 pounds 14.2 ounces, and was awarded the award of Italy's biggest baby. My great-grandma also worked as a cleaning lady one day before he was born. He was born December 24th, and she worked until December 23rd of that year. And if you think my grandpa was big, recently a baby was born in India with 6.7 kilograms, 14.77 pounds, and the world record was for another Italian baby, born in 1955 with flippin' 10.2 kilograms, 22 pounds 8 ounces. I beat anorexia. I'm a guy and I do not have photos of me from that time, due to shame, so I have no proof. I have gone from 70 pounds to 130 pounds. I was shooting some stuff in my village and a bullet ricocheted and hit me in the torso. I was afraid my parents would kill me if they found out. I was young, so I used a knife and tweezers to remove the fragment and a stapler to stitch it up and then covered the wound, and they never found out until a few years later when I told them. Thank you for watching Reddit Space. Please subscribe if you love these Reddit stories.